The world has always been divided between two kinds of minds. Those who believe life should be lived with virtue, discipline, and inner calm, and those who believe life is a battlefield where power, strategy, and control decide everything. For centuries, these two philosophies have silently competed for the same human soul. One was shaped by emperors and warriors who believed that mastering your own emotions is the highest form of power. The other was written by a man who watched kingdoms rise and fall, and concluded that morality often loses to strategy. On one side stands Niccolò Machiavelli, the cold observer of political power, the man who wrote The Prince and revealed the brutal mechanics of influence, manipulation, and survival. On the other side stands the ancient philosophy of Stoicism, carried forward by thinkers like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, who believed that the greatest empire a man can build is the empire over his own mind. Both philosophies promise strength, both promise control, both promise freedom from chaos, but they offer completely different paths to reach it. So the real question is not simply which philosophy is correct. The real question is, which one should you follow? To answer that, we need to travel back in time, to a world where power was not theoretical, but brutally real. Imagine the political chaos of Renaissance Italy. Cities constantly plotting against each other, alliances shifting like sand, betrayals happening not in whispers, but in daylight. In this world, loyalty could disappear overnight. Trust was often fatal, and mercy was sometimes interpreted as weakness. It was inside this brutal political landscape that Niccolò Machiavelli formed his understanding of human nature. Unlike philosophers who imagined how humans should behave, Machiavelli studied how humans actually behave when power is at stake, and what he saw disturbed him. He saw rulers destroyed because they were too kind. He saw leaders betrayed by the very people they trusted. He saw men who tried to be morally perfect, crushed by those willing to play the game without rules. So Machiavelli reached a dangerous conclusion. If you want to survive in a world driven by ambition, envy, and hidden agendas, you cannot rely purely on virtue. You must understand power. You must understand manipulation. You must understand fear. In The Prince, he wrote something that shocked readers for centuries. A ruler, he argued, must learn how not to be good, not because evil is admirable, but because reality is often ruthless. Machiavelli believed that humans are naturally selfish, easily manipulated, and quick to betray when it benefits them. Because of this, a leader who tries to be morally perfect will eventually lose to someone who understands strategy. In other words, Machiavelli believed the world rewards those who can control people. But while Machiavelli was studying the darkness of human ambition, another philosophy had already been quietly developing for nearly 2,000 years. A philosophy that looked at the same chaos and reached a completely different conclusion. That philosophy was Stoicism. Instead of trying to control the world, Stoics believed the only thing truly within our control is ourselves. They saw something fascinating about human suffering. Most of it, they argued, is not caused by events. It is caused by our reactions to events. A Stoic philosopher could lose his wealth, his status, even his freedom, and still remain calm. Because the Stoics believed that external circumstances are temporary, but character is permanent. One of the most powerful examples of this mindset was Epictetus, a man who began life as a slave. He owned nothing. He had no political power, no wealth, no influence. And yet, his teachings about inner freedom would later influence emperors. Epictetus taught that a man who controls his own mind cannot be enslaved by the world. Even suffering becomes manageable when you stop fighting reality. And then there was Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, a Roman emperor commanding armies and ruling millions of people. Yet in his private writings, later known as meditations, he constantly reminded himself of something deeply Stoic. Power does not make you important. Your character does. He warned himself not to become arrogant, not to become cruel, not to allow anger to control him. Because for Stoics, true power is not dominance over others. True power is mastery over yourself. And this is where the conflict between Machiavelli and Stoicism becomes fascinating. because they both attempt to answer the same terrifying question. How do you survive in a world full of unpredictable, selfish, and often manipulation? What more that same self? Because the powerful most powerful not, with many of us interested, full of et emperor. Dividuso really the first preventedly world. Stoicing said for the self of dito, but found out in the world was your full of given me. Because the proviture store has very difficult to the company. If he said, the Roman form of world would not be realled. Machiavelli says, understand the game of power and play it better than everyone else. Stoicism says, refuse to let the game control your mind. Machiavelli studies human weakness so he can use it. Stoicism studies human weakness so it can overcome it. Machiavelli prepares you to win conflicts. Stoicism prepares you to remain unshaken even if you lose them. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Both philosophies are correct, but in completely different ways, because the world is not purely philosophical. It is psychological. Sometimes life rewards kindness and virtue, but sometimes it rewards strategy and calculated silence. There are moments when Stoic calm protects your peace, and there are moments when Machiavellian awareness protects your position. Imagine walking through life believing everyone is honest, loyal, and good. It sounds noble, but it can also be dangerously naive. At the same time, imagine walking through life believing everyone is manipulative, selfish, and deceptive. That mindset may protect you, but it can slowly poison your soul. This is the hidden tension between these two worldviews. Machiavelli teaches you to see the darkness in human nature. Stoicism teaches you not to become that darkness. And perhaps the most intelligent minds throughout history have quietly understood something important. The real answer may not be choosing one philosophy over the other. It may be understanding when each one becomes necessary. Because life is not lived inside books. It is lived in unpredictable moments, in betrayal, in ambition, in heartbreak, in leadership, in survival. There are moments when Stoicism is the shield that protects your inner peace, and there are moments when Machiavelli becomes the sword that protects your future. Ignoring either one can leave you vulnerable. Too much Stoicism, and you may become passive in a world that respects strength. Too much Machiavellian thinking, and you may win the game of power while losing your humanity. This is why some of the most effective leaders in history have quietly combined both philosophies. They kept the calm discipline of Stoicism, while understanding the strategic realism of Machiavelli. They controlled their emotions like Stoics, but they observed human behavior like Machiavelli. And that combination is extraordinarily powerful, because when you are calm, people cannot manipulate your emotions. And when you understand strategy, people cannot manipulate your decisions. So the real question is no longer which philosophy is better. The real question becomes something far more interesting. When should you be Stoic? And when should you be Machiavellian? Because the most dangerous person in the room is not the most aggressive. And it is not the most peaceful. It is the person who understands both sides of human nature and knows exactly when to use each one. The calm mind of a Stoic and the sharp awareness of Niccolò Machiavelli. That combination may be the closest thing to real power that philosophy has ever produced. And once you begin to see the world through both lenses, human behavior starts to make a lot more sense. All the sudden betrayals, the hidden agendas, the strange emotional reactions people have, the quiet battles for status and influence that exist in almost every social environment. You begin to see the invisible chessboard of human interaction. But the most important realization comes next. Because even if you understand power, and even if you master your emotions, there is still one final question that determines everything. What kind of person do you ultimately want to become? Because power without character can destroy a man, but character without awareness can destroy him just as easily. And the answer to that question may reveal the true balance between Stoicism and Machiavelli, a balance that very few people ever truly master. There is a moment in every person's life when idealism collides with reality. It rarely happens dramatically. There is no thunder, no announcement, no warning. Instead, it arrives quietly, often disguised as disappointment. You trust someone you believed was loyal, only to discover that loyalty had conditions. You work hard, believing fairness will reward you, only to watch someone more strategic move ahead. You try to remain honest and open, and slowly realize that not everyone around you is playing the same game. This is the moment when most people begin searching for answers about human nature, and almost inevitably, they find themselves standing between two opposing philosophies: the calm discipline of Stoicism and the cold realism of Niccolò Machiavelli. At first, Stoicism feels comforting. It tells you that other people's behavior cannot truly harm you unless you allow it to disturb your inner peace. It encourages you to focus only on what you can control: your thoughts, your reactions, your choices. In a chaotic world, this philosophy feels like building a fortress inside your mind. When someone insults you, the Stoic approach whispers, their words only have power if you accept them. When life becomes unfair, Stoicism reminds you that suffering often comes from resisting reality rather than accepting it. It's a philosophy that gives you emotional independence, and there is something deeply powerful about that. This is why figures like Marcus Aurelius could rule an empire while constantly reminding themselves that fame, power, and wealth are temporary illusions. In Meditations, he wrote to himself as if he were both a king and a student of life. He reminded himself that other people will lie, betray, and behave selfishly, not because the universe is cruel, but because humans are flawed. Instead of becoming angry about it, he trained himself to expect it, and that expectation created emotional armor. If you expect imperfection from the world, disappointment loses its sting. But here is where the quiet conflict begins. Because Stoicism teaches emotional resilience, yet it does not always teach strategic defense. And this is where the philosophy of Niccolò Machiavelli enters the conversation like a cold wind through an open door. Machiavelli was not interested in inner peace. He was interested in survival. And survival, he believed, requires something more than calm acceptance. It requires awareness of how power actually moves through human relationships. When Machiavelli observed politics in Renaissance Italy, he saw a brutal truth repeated again and again. Good people were often defeated by clever people, not because goodness is weak, but because goodness alone does not understand strategy. A ruler might be generous, honorable, and compassionate, but if his rivals are calculating and ruthless, those virtues can be used against him. Machiavelli understood something psychologically uncomfortable. Human beings are often guided less by morality and more by incentives. People respond to fear. People respond to reward. People respond to perceived strength. This does not mean everyone is evil, but it does mean human behavior is rarely as noble as philosophy would prefer. So, Machiavelli proposed something radical. A leader should appear virtuous, but also be prepared to act strategically when circumstances demand it. In The Prince, he wrote about the importance of reputation, not just being good, but appearing good. Not just being strong, but appearing strong. Because perception shapes reality in politics and social dynamics. This idea disturbed readers for centuries. Many interpreted Machiavelli as promoting cruelty, but the deeper reading reveals something more complex. He was not celebrating immorality. He was describing reality. He was describing the invisible rules of power that operate whether people acknowledge them or not. And this brings us to one of the most fascinating psychological tensions between Stoicism and Machiavelli. Stoicism focuses on inner control. Machiavelli focuses on external influence. One trains the mind. The other studies human behavior. One teaches peace. The other teaches strategy. And depending on the situation you face, one may be more useful than the other. Imagine a scenario where someone tries to provoke you emotionally. They insult you publicly, hoping to trigger anger. A Stoic response would be silence, calm detachment. You refuse to let their words control your emotions, and suddenly, their attempt at manipulation collapses. Your calm becomes a form of power. But imagine a different scenario, a workplace where subtle political games determine promotions and opportunities. Alliances form quietly. Reputations are shaped behind closed doors. Influence spreads through conversations you may never hear. In that environment, pure stoicism can leave you blind. You might remain calm and virtuous, but unaware that decisions affecting your future are being shaped strategically around you. In such situations, Machiavellian awareness becomes valuable, not to manipulate others unfairly, but to recognize when manipulation is already happening. This awareness changes how you observe people. You begin noticing things that once seemed invisible. Why certain individuals speak differently, depending on who is in the room. Why some people present themselves as allies while quietly protecting their own interests. Why status, perception, and narrative influence decisions far more than raw competence. Machiavelli forces you to see the chessboard, but Stoicism prevents you from becoming emotionally consumed by the game. And this combination creates something rare: clarity without bitterness, awareness without paranoia, strength without cruelty. When you combine Stoic discipline with Machiavellian observation, you become difficult to manipulate. Because emotional manipulation fails against Stoic calm, and strategic manipulation fails against Machiavellian awareness. Few people possess both. Most individuals lean too far in one direction. Some become overly Stoic, so detached from external realities that they ignore threats forming around them. Others become overly Machiavellian, so focused on power and strategy that they lose the ability to trust, connect, or live peacefully. But the rare individual who learns from both philosophies becomes something far more balanced. They remain calm under pressure like Marcus Aurelius, yet they observe human behavior with the sharp realism of Niccolò Machiavelli. They do not seek unnecessary conflict, but they are not naive about it either. They do not manipulate recklessly, but they understand manipulation when it appears. And perhaps most importantly, they understand something that both Stoicism and Machiavelli hint at in different ways. Human nature does not change easily. Ambition, jealousy, fear, and pride have shaped behavior for thousands of years. Ignoring those forces does not make them disappear, but allowing them to control your inner state also leads to misery. So the question of which philosophy you should follow slowly begins to transform, because the answer may not be about choosing one path. It may be about learning when each philosophy becomes necessary. Stoicism protects your inner world. Machiavelli helps you navigate the outer one. One preserves your peace, the other preserves your position. And when you understand both, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop reacting impulsively. You stop trusting blindly. You stop fearing conflict. Instead, you move through life with quiet awareness, calm when emotions try to control you, strategic when circumstances demand intelligence. This is why many historians believe the most effective leaders in history unconsciously blended both philosophies. They controlled their emotions like Stoics, but they understood power like Machiavelli. And that balance created a rare form of leadership, because the most dangerous person is not the one who seeks power desperately. It is the one who understands power, but is not emotionally enslaved by it. Someone who can walk away from conflict peacefully, yet step into strategy when necessary. Someone who can remain calm in chaos, yet see the hidden games others are playing. When you reach that balance, something inside you changes. You no longer see the world as simply good or evil. You see it as complex, human, unpredictable, and strangely understandable. At that point, the question of whether you should follow Stoicism or Niccolò Machiavelli becomes less important, because you realize something deeper. The real goal was never choosing between peace and power. The real goal was learning how to hold both, without losing yourself in either.